What you do at 10 p.m. may trigger a heart attack after 50. Stop right there. Before you do anything else, I need you to do one thing. Put your hand on your chest, feel that heartbeat. That muscle has been beating every single second of your life without a break. It doesn't rest, it doesn't get tired of the job, it doesn't ask for a pause. And right now, tonight, between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., it's going to face conditions that most people over 50 are completely unprepared for. You've been told sleep is when your body heals. In many ways, that's true. But your heart, your cardiovascular system, does not simply shut down and coast through the night. What actually happens inside your body during those 8 hours is far more complex, far more active, and far more dangerous than anyone ever took the time to explain to you. And what you do in the 60 to 90 minutes before you close your eyes can either protect your heart during the most vulnerable window of the day or silently push it toward the edge. I'm Dr. Megan Foster. I've spent more than 2 decades in surgical practice. I've been in operating rooms at 2 a.m. responding to heart attacks and strokes that began while someone was sleeping. I've spoken to families in waiting rooms who had absolutely no idea anything was wrong. Their person went to bed fine. They didn't wake up. And I've spent years studying the research that explains exactly why these events happen when they do, and what specific, everyday behaviors consistently appear in the hours before them. Today, I'm going to give you that information clearly, practically, and completely. No exaggeration, no fear tactics, just the real picture of what your heart is doing at night, what puts it at risk, and exactly what you can do about it starting tonight. This is going to take some time. I'm going to go deep on this because you deserve more than a surface level list. Stay with me. What I'm sharing in the next 40 something minutes could genuinely be one of the most important things you watch this year. Let's start at the very foundation because before we can talk about what goes wrong, you need to understand what right looks like. What is your heart actually supposed to do while you sleep? Most people imagine the sleeping heart like a car engine idling, ticking over quietly, barely working, just maintaining. That picture is completely wrong, and I want to correct it right now because understanding what normal looks like is the only way to recognize when something is off. Your heart during sleep is dynamic, it is actively shifting, it is responding to signals from your brain, your lungs, your hormonal system, and your physical environment, all at the same time, all night long. Sleep is not a flat line, it is a series of distinct biological stages, each with its own cardiovascular signature. In the first hour or two after you fall asleep, your body shifts into rest and recovery mode. Your heart rate drops, your blood pressure falls, usually by 10 to 20% compared to daytime levels. Your body temperature lowers. This is when your heart gets a genuine window of reduced load. But that window doesn't last. Around 90 minutes in, you enter your first REM cycle, the dreaming stage. During REM, heart rate and blood pressure become irregular and can spike suddenly. Your breathing turns shallow. Your brain is nearly as active as when you're awake. And this cycle of cardiovascular turbulence repeats every 90 minutes all night, with each REM period growing longer. By 5 or 6 a.m., a single REM cycle can last close to an hour, a long window of instability. And then comes the morning cortisol surge. Starting around 4 a.m., your adrenal glands release cortisol to prepare your body for waking. Cortisol raises blood pressure, increases heart rate, activates inflammation pathways, and, critically, activates blood clotting factors. The proteins that seal wounds become more concentrated and more active in this window. This is why heart attacks and strokes cluster disproportionately between 6 and 10 a.m. Blood pressure is at its daily peak. Blood is at its most prone to clotting. Any existing weakness in the arterial system is most likely to be exposed right here. Think of it this way. Your heart is climbing a steep hill every single morning, regardless of what you do. The question is whether it starts that climb rested and stable, or exhausted, overstrained, and already under pressure from the night before. The habits we're going to discuss are what determine the answer to that question. Now, before we get into the habits, I need to give you one more piece of foundational information because without it, the habits won't make complete sense. After the age of 50, your cardiovascular system undergoes changes that are gradual, quiet, and almost universally underestimated. Your arteries begin to lose their natural flexibility. When you were young, they stretched and recoiled with every heartbeat like new rubber tubing, absorbing the force of each beat and distributing blood smoothly. As we age, the elastic fibers inside the arterial wall break down and are replaced by stiffer collagen fibers. Your arteries behave less like flexible hose and more like rigid pipe. Rigid pipe cannot absorb pressure. Every overnight blood pressure spike hits the arterial wall with greater mechanical force than it would have 20 years ago. The inner lining of your arteries, a thin, active layer called the endothelium, also changes. It releases fewer protective chemicals and more inflammatory ones. It responds more slowly to pressure changes and it becomes more vulnerable to injury. Then there's plaque. Arterial plaque builds silently for decades before causing any symptoms. By the time most people are in their 50s, some degree of plaque is already present in the coronary arteries, the vessels supplying blood to the heart muscle. Most of the time, this causes no obvious problems, but some plaque is structurally unstable. Under the right triggering conditions, it can rupture, tear away from the wall. When it does, the body immediately sends clotting factors to seal the site. That clot can form fast enough to block the artery completely. No blood reaches the heart muscle beyond that point. That is a heart attack. Not from the plaque itself, from the clot that forms in response to its rupture. The conditions that trigger plaque rupture include elevated blood pressure, inflammation, increased clotting tendency, and sudden hormonal surges. Every one of those conditions peaks in the early morning hours, which is exactly why overnight habits are not abstract health advice. They directly shape the conditions under which that specific event becomes more or less likely. One more concept before the list. Blood viscosity, how thick your blood is, changes constantly based on hydration, diet, temperature, and hormones. During sleep, blood naturally becomes somewhat thicker from reduced fluid intake and hormonal shifts. Thicker blood is harder to pump, generates more arterial wall pressure, and clots more readily. This natural overnight thickening is manageable in a healthy system, but compounded by dehydration, alcohol, and the morning cortisol surge, it becomes a genuine risk factor. This is the landscape your heart is navigating every night. Now you have the full picture. And now the habits we're about to discuss will make complete sense, not just as rules, but as real physiological interventions. Let's go through them. We're starting at 7 and working toward the most dangerous, number 7. And this one surprises almost everyone because it has nothing to do with food, alcohol, or anything that most people think of as a heart health issue. Sleeping with your phone in the bedroom. Before I explain this, I want to be clear about what this is not about. This is not primarily about electromagnetic radiation from the device. That concern is often overstated. What this is about is a hormone called melatonin. And understanding what melatonin actually does will change the way you think about your phone at night permanently. Melatonin is produced by a small gland in your brain called the pineal gland. Most people know it as a sleep hormone, but its role in your body goes far beyond drowsiness. Melatonin actively lowers blood pressure. It directly reduces cortisol. It suppresses the inflammatory signaling pathways in your arteries. It acts as an antioxidant, protecting arterial wall cells from oxidative damage that promotes plaque development. Melatonin is one of your body's most important overnight cardiovascular protective hormones, and it is exquisitely sensitive to light, specifically to the blue wavelength emitted by every phone screen, tablet, computer monitor, and LED television currently in use. Here's the specific finding I want you to hold on to. Research shows that 60 to 90 minutes of blue light exposure in the evening can suppress melatonin production for the first 3 to 4 hours of your sleep period. This is not about the light keeping you awake. You can fall asleep completely normally. But for the first several hours of sleep, your body is producing far less melatonin than it should, which means far less overnight blood pressure reduction, far less cortisol suppression, and far less arterial protection during the very hours those protections are most needed. And there's a second mechanism. Your phone, even face down on the nightstand, even on silent mode, generates what sleep researchers call microarousals, brief, partial awakenings triggered by sounds, vibrations, notification lights, or simply the subconscious awareness of the device. You may never remember these awakenings, you may not feel them, but they fragment your sleep architecture throughout the night, repeatedly pulling you out of the deeper stages where cardiovascular recovery occurs. Each microarousal triggers a brief but real spike in cortisol and blood pressure. Multiply that by a night's worth of interruptions, and the cumulative cardiovascular load is genuinely significant. The solution is simple and the only thing that fully addresses both mechanisms. The phone leaves the bedroom, not face down on the nightstand, not in your pocket. In another room entirely, on Do Not Disturb. If you use your phone as an alarm, a dedicated alarm clock costs less than $10 and does the job without any of the cardiovascular risk. Additionally, ending all screen use, phone, television, tablet, at least 60 minutes before your target sleep time gives your melatonin production enough runway to begin rising before you fall asleep. During that screen free hour, reading a physical book, having a calm conversation, light stretching, or simply sitting in dimmed lighting all support the hormonal shift your cardiovascular system needs to enter its protective overnight mode. Reading a physical book, light conversation, gentle stretching, calm music. Any of these, done consistently in the 60 minutes before sleep, creates a measurable hormonal shift that lowers your blood pressure, quiets your cortisol, and prepares your cardiovascular system for the protective dip it needs. This is free. It costs nothing. And its impact on overnight cardiovascular protection is real and measurable. Now, number 6, and this one challenges something most people have never once questioned: sleeping in a room that is too warm. We associate warmth with comfort, comfort with sleep, and sleep with health. So the idea that a warm bedroom might be hurting your heart sounds almost counterintuitive. But the physiology is very clear. Your core body temperature is programmed to drop during sleep. This is not incidental. It is a biological prerequisite for reaching the deeper, most restorative stages of sleep. As your core temperature falls, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure decreases, your metabolic rate drops, and your cardiovascular system genuinely enters a lower demand state. The temperature drop is the trigger. Without it, deep sleep becomes significantly harder to achieve and maintain. When your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot accomplish this temperature drop efficiently. Your blood vessels at the skin surface dilate to try to radiate heat outward. Your heart rate stays elevated to support that heat release process. You produce sweat, and sweat means fluid loss, which means your blood becomes more viscous as the night progresses. And your sleep architecture suffers. You spend less time in deep, slow wave sleep and more time in lighter, less restorative stages. There is specific clinical research connecting warmer sleep environments to elevated nighttime blood pressure, reduced deep sleep duration, and higher morning cortisol levels, all three of which are independent cardiovascular risk factors. Not in extreme cases. In the range of temperatures most people sleep in regularly. The target range that consistently shows the best cardiovascular and sleep outcomes is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 to 19 degrees Celsius. For most people who have been sleeping in a warmer room for years, this feels noticeably cool at first. That feeling passes quickly. Within 5 to 7 days of sleeping in a properly cooled environment, the vast majority of people report dramatically improved sleep quality, easier morning waking, and a noticeably calmer resting state. The most common mistake people make when they try this is adding heavy blankets to compensate for the cooler air. That defeats the purpose entirely. The body needs to be able to release heat through the skin. Heavy, heat trapping blankets prevent that. The right combination is a cool room around 65 degrees if you can, with light, breathable bedding. Natural fabrics like cotton or bamboo allow airflow and moisture wicking far better than synthetic materials. If you share a bed with a partner who prefers warmth, this becomes a conversation worth having specifically in cardiovascular terms. Because the physiological argument for a cooler room is not about preference. It is about the conditions under which your heart can actually recover overnight. Number 5. And this one is connected to almost every other risk on this list in ways that are not immediately obvious. Going to bed dehydrated. The thirst mechanism in humans is a late stage signal. By the time you feel thirsty, you are already meaningfully dehydrated. And after 50, that mechanism becomes even less reliable. It responds more slowly, signals less strongly, and is easier to misread as hunger or fatigue. Most people over 50 are in a state of mild chronic dehydration for much of their waking hours. Not dramatically dehydrated, not the kind that impairs obvious functioning, just quietly below optimal fluid levels. And that mild deficit carried into the overnight hours creates a specific cardiovascular problem. When your blood plasma volume, the liquid portion of your blood, decreases from dehydration, your blood becomes more concentrated. The red blood cells, the clotting proteins, the inflammatory markers, all of them are now in a smaller volume of liquid. Your blood is thicker. It moves with more resistance through vessels that are already less flexible after 50. Your heart works harder to push this thicker blood. And because the clotting factors are more concentrated, your blood is more prone to forming dangerous clots, particularly in the early morning hours when the cortisol surge is further activating those clotting systems. There's also a kidney connection most people don't know about. When your body detects low fluid levels, your kidneys release a hormone that signals your body to retain sodium. Sodium retention causes your body to hold water to balance it out, which increases blood volume and raises blood pressure. So, dehydration triggers a hormonal cascade that quietly elevates your overnight blood pressure through an entirely separate mechanism from the blood thickening effect. Two pathways, both harmful, both operating simultaneously while you sleep. There's also something worth knowing about caffeine and hydration that many people get wrong. Coffee and tea count toward your fluid intake, but only partially. Caffeine has a mild diuretic effect, meaning it prompts your kidneys to excrete more fluid. 2 or 3 cups of coffee through the day without adequate plain water alongside can leave you meaningfully behind on hydration by early evening. And that deficit is what carries into the night. The practical solution is distributed hydration: water with breakfast, water mid morning, water with lunch, water in the early afternoon. Not large quantities at any single point, but a steady, consistent intake. Then a small glass, 6 to 8 ounces, about 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Not right at bedtime, where it risks waking you for the bathroom. Early enough to be absorbed and contribute to overnight plasma volume. Your morning mouth is your feedback mechanism. If you regularly wake up with a dry mouth or feeling dehydrated, your evening hydration is insufficient. Most people who correct their daytime hydration notice a meaningful difference in morning alertness and calmness within 3 to 5 days. Number 4, and I want to approach this one carefully because it deserves honest engagement, not dismissal: alcohol before bed. For many people over 50, a drink in the evening is one of the consistent pleasures of the day. It marks the transition from the demands of work to something quieter and more personal. I understand that. I'm not approaching this as a morality question. I'm approaching it as a physiological one. Alcohol is metabolized by your liver at roughly 1 standard drink per hour. During that process, your liver converts alcohol into a compound called acetaldehyde, which is stimulating to the nervous system. As it builds and then clears, typically in the middle of the night, it generates what researchers call the alcohol rebound effect. Your brain, initially sedated, swings back toward alertness as the acetaldehyde clears. This is exactly why people who drink before bed often fall asleep easily, but wake between 2 and 4 a.m., unable to return to sleep. Not coincidence, pharmacological rebound. But the sleep disruption is only part of the cardiovascular story. Alcohol causes blood vessels to dilate, initially dropping blood pressure. Your heart senses reduced resistance and increases its output to compensate. Then, as the alcohol clears, blood vessels constrict and blood pressure rebounds, often above the pre drinking baseline. This rebound hits in the middle of the night, during the hours the cardiovascular system is already most vulnerable. It generates a pressure spike against arterial walls that are stiffer, carrying plaque, and operating in a heightened clotting environment. Alcohol also directly affects the heart's electrical conduction system. Even moderate consumption can provoke irregular heart rhythms, including a well documented phenomenon called holiday heart syndrome, occurring in people with no prior cardiac history. In people over 50 with existing undiagnosed arterial changes, this electrical instability during sleep is a genuine risk. And alcohol is a diuretic. It suppresses the hormone that tells your kidneys to retain fluid, causing you to produce more urine overnight and accelerating blood thickening. The practical recommendation is timing. 3 to 4 hours between your last drink and sleep allows your liver to largely clear it, reduces the rebound effect, and allows melatonin to function. Drinking with a 6 p.m. dinner and going to bed at 10 is physiologically workable. A final drink at 9:30 and sleep at 10:30 is a genuinely different cardiovascular picture and not a favorable one. Number 3, and this sits at the intersection of nutrition, hormones, and heart health in a way that surprises most people. Eating a large, heavy meal late in the evening. Your body does not process food the same way at all hours. Your digestive efficiency, insulin sensitivity, and liver function are all regulated by your internal biological clock, the circadian system that coordinates your body's processes with the cycle of day and night. During daylight hours, your metabolic machinery runs efficiently. Insulin is released in a timely, effective response. Blood sugar rises and comes back down cleanly. In the evening, and especially late evening, that efficiency declines. The same meal that your body processes smoothly at noon requires significantly more metabolic effort at 8 or 9 p.m. Insulin is slower and less effective. Blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer, and your liver has to handle incoming nutrients at the same time it is trying to perform its overnight maintenance work. The cardiovascular effects are specific and measurable. Blood pressure rises as circulation redirects toward the digestive system. Inflammatory signaling increases as part of the normal metabolic response to eating. And sustained elevated blood sugar, which is more common after 50 than most people realize, quietly damages the endothelium, the inner arterial lining, over time. When you lie flat after a large meal, gravity no longer assists digestion. The stomach works harder, acid reflux risk increases sharply. And acid reflux is not merely uncomfortable. The vagus nerve runs alongside the esophagus and connects directly to the heart. Esophageal acid exposure can stimulate this nerve in ways that trigger irregular heart rhythms. People who experience nighttime heart pounding after a heavy dinner often have no idea the two things are connected. High sodium meals compound everything. Most restaurant food, takeout, and processed food contains sodium levels 2 to 4 times what a heart protective dinner should. Sodium causes fluid retention overnight, raising blood pressure through a direct volume mechanism that persists right into the morning cortisol surge. The practical target: finish your largest meal at least 3 hours before sleep. Lighter evening meals, lean protein, vegetables, moderate carbohydrates, low sodium, are processed cleanly and leave your heart in a genuinely quieter state by midnight. If your schedule forces late eating, focus on reducing sodium and fat load in whatever you eat. Those two factors carry the most overnight cardiovascular weight. Now we're entering the top two. And I want to prepare you for this section because what I'm about to describe isn't just about long term risk accumulation. These next two habits can create immediate, measurable, overnight cardiovascular instability, the kind you may actually be feeling and misattributing to something else entirely. If you regularly wake at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding, if you experience what feels like your heart skipping or racing in the night, if you wake with unexplained headaches, if you have night sweats that don't seem connected to room temperature, these are not random. They are not simply aging. After this section, you are going to understand exactly what is generating them. Number two, untreated sleep apnea. Untreated. Of everything on this list, sleep apnea may be the single most consequential and the most chronically underaddressed cardiovascular risk factor in people over 50. And I want to explain it in enough detail that if you or someone you love has any of the signs, you take it seriously. Not eventually. Soon. Sleep apnea is a condition in which the muscles of your throat and airway partially or completely collapse during sleep, cutting off airflow. This can happen dozens or hundreds of times per night. And each time it happens, your blood oxygen level falls. Now, here's what happens in your body in response to that oxygen drop, toppers. And this is the part most people don't fully understand. Your brain has sensors that monitor oxygen levels constantly, even during sleep. When oxygen falls below a threshold, your brain triggers a survival alarm. It releases a surge of adrenaline, the same hormone that floods your body when you perceive immediate physical danger. Your heart rate accelerates. Your blood pressure spikes, sometimes by 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury within seconds. That is the equivalent of sitting calmly and then suddenly being chased. While you are lying in bed, while you appear to be sleeping, your airway reopens. You take a breath. Your oxygen recovers. And within 60 to 90 seconds, it happens again. In a person with moderate sleep apnea, this cycle repeats perhaps 15 to 30 times per hour. In severe cases, it can exceed 60 or even 100 times per hour. That means your body is triggering a full adrenaline fueled cardiovascular stress response repeatedly throughout every single night of sleep, not occasionally, every night for years. The cardiovascular consequences are not subtle. Repeated adrenaline surges chronically elevate blood pressure, not just at night, but persistently around the clock. They accelerate arterial stiffening. They promote chronic inflammation inside blood vessels. They accelerate plaque development. They make blood substantially more prone to clotting. And they deprive the heart muscle itself of adequate oxygen during the very hours it is supposed to be recovering. The documented long term outcomes of untreated sleep apnea include persistent hypertension, resistant to standard medication doses, stroke risk elevated 2 to 4 times the baseline, significantly higher rates of atrial fibrillation, an irregular heart rhythm that itself dramatically raises stroke risk, an increased incidence of sudden cardiac death during sleep. And most people with sleep apnea have no idea they have it. They snore. They wake up a little tired. They've attributed their fatigue to stress or aging. Their partner has mentioned the snoring. They've made a joke about it. And it has gone unaddressed for 5, 10, sometimes 20 years. I want to specifically address a misconception that causes people to dismiss this concern. Many believe sleep apnea only affects people who are significantly overweight. This is wrong. While excess weight is a significant risk factor, sleep apnea is fundamentally a structural issue. The anatomy of your jaw, your soft palate position, the natural narrowing of the airway that occurs as muscle tone decreases with age, all of these contribute independently of body weight. Lean, athletic people develop sleep apnea regularly. Body size is one factor. It is not the only one. Warning signs to take seriously. snoring loud enough to be heard through closed doors, a partner who has observed you stopping breathing during sleep, one of the most definitive signs, morning headaches across the forehead, a classic marker of overnight oxygen drops, waking at night needing to urinate repeatedly. Apnea events trigger a hormonal response that increases urine production. Persistent daytime fatigue despite adequate time in bed. Difficulty concentrating. Unexplained mood irritability. Any combination of these warrants a sleep evaluation. Home sleep testing has become accessible, affordable, and far less invasive than the hospital based studies of earlier decades. You can complete an evaluation in your own bed with a small device worn overnight, and treatment works. The most common treatment, a continuous positive airway pressure device, is highly effective at eliminating apnea events and has been shown to reduce blood pressure, improve heart rhythm stability, and significantly lower long term cardiovascular risk in people who use it consistently. There are alternatives for those who cannot tolerate it: positional therapy, dental appliances, and, in appropriate cases, surgical options. I want to be honest about something. Many people have been prescribed treatment, tried it for a week, found it uncomfortable, and stopped. I understand that reaction, but the devices have improved enormously in the past 5 years. They are quieter, lighter, and more comfortable than they were even recently. If a previous attempt failed, it is worth revisiting. The cardiovascular case for persistence is compelling. For many people over 50, treating sleep apnea may be the single most impactful cardiovascular intervention available, more impactful in some research than medication alone. Number one, the most underestimated overnight cardiovascular risk and the one that requires the most nuanced explanation because it involves understanding something about blood pressure that most people, including many who have been diagnosed with hypertension and are currently taking medication for it, have never been told. Mistimed blood pressure medication and the unmonitored problem of nighttime blood pressure patterns. Your blood pressure is not a fixed number. It rises and falls throughout the day in a predictable rhythm. During active waking hours, it runs higher. In the early morning, it climbs toward its daily peak. And during sleep, in a normally functioning cardiovascular system, it falls, typically by 10 to 20% compared to daytime levels. This nighttime fall is called the dipping pattern. It gives the arterial wall a window of reduced stress, reduces mechanical wear on the endothelium, and allows the heart a period of genuinely lower demand. But a significant percentage of people, between 20 and 40% of those with hypertension, and higher proportions among people over 65, those with diabetes and those with kidney disease, do not show this normal pattern. Their blood pressure does not fall meaningfully during sleep. In some people, it actually rises. These individuals are called non-dippers or reverse dippers, and their overnight blood pressure pattern is a substantially stronger predictor of heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death than any single daytime measurement. Here's the profound clinical gap this creates. The blood pressure reading your doctor takes is a daytime reading. It tells them nothing about what your blood pressure does at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. A patient can have an acceptable office reading, 128/80, nothing alarming, while their blood pressure at 3 in the morning runs at 155/95, silently damaging arterial walls every single night, week after week, year after year. Because this nighttime pattern has never been measured, it has never been treated. The patient thinks they're fine. The doctor sees a reasonable daytime reading, and the cardiovascular damage accumulates invisibly. There is also an important dimension related to medication timing. Standard practice has historically been to take blood pressure medication in the morning. This made logical sense when nighttime blood pressure wasn't systematically measured or understood. But research has evolved. A major chronotherapy study following more than 19,000 patients over several years found that patients who took their blood pressure medication at bedtime had substantially lower rates of major cardiovascular events than those who took it in the morning. Subsequent research on this finding has produced varying results, and the scientific conversation continues. But the underlying principle that when you take a medication may matter as much as what medication you take is now a legitimate, actively researched area of cardiovascular medicine. Do not change your medication timing on your own. What this is, clearly and absolutely, is a recommendation to have a specific conversation with your physician about your nighttime blood pressure. Ask about ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, a 24-hour recording done with a small portable device that takes readings every 20 to 30 minutes throughout the day and night. It provides information that a single office reading simply cannot. If you have a home blood pressure monitor, and if you don't, an accurate automatic cuff costs under $40 and is one of the best health investments you can make. Begin taking readings at two specific times each day: before bed and immediately upon waking, before getting up or having coffee. Keep a 2-week log. Bring that log to your physician. If your morning readings are consistently higher than your evening readings, especially if they're elevated even on days when you've slept well and feel calm, that pattern is worth discussing. It may indicate a non-dipping profile. It may indicate that your current treatment plan needs adjustment. This is information you have a right to. Your overnight blood pressure pattern is part of your cardiovascular health picture. The fact that it is rarely measured in standard care does not mean it is not important. By the evidence, it is arguably the most predictive individual measurement available for long-term cardiovascular risk. Now, I want to bring everything together with the most important concept of this entire conversation. I call it the compound night effect, and understanding it will permanently change how you think about cardiovascular risk. We naturally think about health habits in isolation. Alcohol is one risk, late dinner is another, dehydration is another. We evaluate each one separately, weigh the inconvenience of changing it, and often conclude that no single habit is alarming enough to disrupt something comfortable. That reasoning is understandable. It is also physiologically wrong.